Well, good morning. Here we are into week 5. I can't believe how quickly the time's going by. It always seems to me like it goes by even quicker in the fall than it does in the spring, but we're going to soon be uh, halfway through this term, and that's just amazing to me. So I'm going to break down this week's lecture into two relatively short ones, and I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. But this one is about my grading process and your participation in the grading process. So first, let me say you can check your grades at any time on your page on the main class website. There should be a percentage uh, of total there, and you can translate that into the standard grading scale in the syllabus. 90 to 100 is an A. 80 to 90 is a B. I know there's some overlap there. But basically you can figure out where you are, and then you can figure out if you need to change it up. And one of the really cool things about Canvas is you can take the grade on any project and you can plug in a new grade. Like if, say, you got an 86 on a piece, you can plug in a 92 on the piece and see how that changes your overall GPA, so you know what you could have done if your paper had been a little bit better. I find that really useful. I used it when I took courses about how to run Canvas. We played with that, and I found it really, really useful. So let me explain to you the grading process that I go through. I know we haven't taken time to do this because we've all been crazy. So here's how it works for me. When you send me a paper, I make the assumption that that is the very best you can do. And I have no way of determining whether that's true or not because I don't have the facts or the background information to determine. So I choose to assume that that paper I'm looking at on my screen is the very best you could do. And so I approach it in that way, and what I do is I put myself in your shoes, and the comments, mostly the comments that I make back to you, are comments if I were in your shoes and I were writing this paper in this project. Here is what I would have done to make this paper better. The assumption is this is the best you can do, and you're willing to take a chance to try to make it better. Those are assumptions I have to make, or I would not be able to do my job. So I don't determine whether it's true or not. I just assume that that's the case, and then I behave as though. And so the comments I make back to you, you can take as suggestions of what probably you could have done or should have done to make your paper better in this case. I'm a good writer. I've been writing for 40 years. I know how it works. And so what I do with each paper requires a psychological shift. On my part, I have to try to put myself in your shoes based upon the piece of writing that you gave me. And then I have to think about how it could be improved, and then I have to try to express that back to you in ways that you will understand. Whether you choose to take my suggestions is another matter, but that's up to you. That's the judgment I make, and that's how I approach grading, which is why I'm slow. Now, I have been incredibly slow this first little bit of the term because I've been trying to go through the modules each week and make them as clear and precise and as efficient and as easy for you as possible. And that's required a lot of my time, and so grading has been part of that picture, but I've been slow. I won't be as slow in future, although I am a slow grader. It's a fact because of the time I invest and the shift I have to make from one paper to the next, and the fact that there are still 58 of you and one of me. But I'm going to get a little faster. But the truth of the matter is, it's going to take 10 days to 2 weeks for me to get papers fully back to you. And I will grade them in the order in which they come in. So that explains, I think, a little bit about the way I approach my grading. Grading is the most difficult part of my job to me. It's the most challenging and requires the greatest amount of energy. I can grade 10 papers and I'm drained. I've got to stop and rest. It drains the energy out of me. So that's how I approach it. The assumption that you've done your best, that what you've given me is your very best work, and that you're willing to take the chance and you have the courage to try to make your work better. And of course, I've never read a perfect paper. I've never written a perfect paper. We're all works in progress. And so I have to make that judgment about, and sometimes it breaks my heart to get a paper that could have been so good if only the student had invested a little more time or developed the ideas a little more carefully or had a better grasp of essay structure or whatever would have improved and made this paper brilliant. Instead, it's, not as good as it could be. So that's how I approach my work. I consider it a sacred trust, really. Now, here's a fact. The fact is, for the folks who dash these things off at the last minute, it is a fact that the product you dash off at the last minute absolutely 100% will not be as good as the product you spend time on drafting and crafting and invest energy and time into. That product's going to be better. That's a fact. And I can tell you that absolutely without exception. However, I do not make the judgment that this paper you've given me is not the best you could do. I can't make that judgment. I don't have the information or the data to be able to make that judgment. So I don't make that judgment. I assume it's your best. If it isn't, only you know that it isn't. I don't know. And I'm not going to make that judgment. So the suggestions I make, all the way from grammatical stuff to, ideas to paragraph structure to thesis statement, all of the things that presumably you sort of mastered in English 1A or freshman composition, I hold those standards up and I hold your essay up against them and I say, well, here's where you fell a little short and here's what you could do if you have the courage to make it better next time. Those decisions are up to you. And finally, in terms of grading, and then I'll stop this video, you notice this week that I've uploaded a little quiz for you to take having to do with conjunctive, not conjunctive adverbs, with topic sentence and thesis statements in an academic paragraph. When I see patterns of issues like that, there isn't time to teach that material in this class. That material was already taught in the freshman composition class that you took. So there's not time to reteach that material, but there is time to focus on it with these little quizzes and things. So when I give you a quiz, it's because I've seen a pattern of this stuff that messes up thought flow and confuses readers and writers both, and I'm saying we need to clean this up. The way to avoid those little quizzes is for you to do the background work and legwork and get your stuff cleaned up before you give it to me, and if I don't see patterns, then we won't have to do the little quizzes. So the way to avoid those is to get your stuff right the first time, and then if you don't, it's no thing. We need to review a little bit, and I'm happy to do that, but it's going to require extra effort on both your part and mine to address those problems. It actually, from a writer's standpoint, it takes less effort and energy if you address those problems up front and fix them before you turn in the finished product. But that again is up to you. So that's my grading process. That's the frame of mind within which I approach grading my papers, your papers, and that's the frame of mind with which I write back to you with suggestions and criticisms and whatever I offer. You will just need to understand the frame of reference within which they're offered. Okay, so I'm going to stop this one now and move on to the assignments for this week.